Online friendships often begin in ordinary places. Game servers, chat groups, shared spaces where people meet through music, games, or common interests. Most of the time, those spaces are harmless. Just teenagers talking, laughing, and passing time. But sometimes something else begins there. Something that looks like friendship at first, but slowly becomes something very different. One of those conversations began in a game lobby, not some dark corner of the internet, just a normal server where teens built worlds, joked around, and shared tips. That's where Tay logged in. Tay was new to the group. One player stood out, B. She wasn't just funny, she paid attention. She messaged outside the game. She remembered small things. When Tay's dog died, she was the first person to comfort him. That mattered. Because being noticed matters, especially when you're young. One day, B asked for a photo, just to see his face. Nothing strange about that. Friends share photos. Tay sent one. She sent one back. She looked real. She felt real. Then she asked for another, a different kind. Just for me, she said. I won't show anyone, promise. That night, Tay didn't sleep. So here's the question. Why do situations like this begin so often with friendship? Why does online grooming almost always start with kindness instead of pressure? Because grooming is not about sudden danger, it is about building trust first. The word grooming sounds sinister, and it is. But the beginning rarely looks that way. At the start, it often looks like validation, attention, kindness that feels overdue. For a teen who feels invisible, it might be the first time someone really listens. For someone who already feels different, too nerdy, too foreign, too awkward, the attention can feel even more powerful. That is what makes grooming effective. It meets a real emotional need, then slowly begins to reshape it. Predators understand something important about human behaviour. Trust grows through repetition. A message today, another tomorrow, a private joke, a shared frustration, late-night conversations when everyone else is offline. Over time, those small moments create familiarity, and familiarity feels safe. The brain begins to file the person into a simple category, friend. Once that happens, the relationship feels different. Friends are trusted, friends are believed, friends are given the benefit of the doubt, and that is when the situation can begin to change, not suddenly. Just slightly. The conversation becomes more personal. The stranger may start saying things like, "You can tell me anything. I've never told anyone this before. I trust you." Now the relationship feels deeper, more important, more private. And once that emotional bond exists, the pressure can begin. Requests for more personal information, requests for photos, requests for things that suddenly feel uncomfortable. By that stage, the situation is confusing, because the person asking still feels like a friend, someone who listened, someone who understood, someone who was there. That confusion is exactly what grooming relies on, because by the time the red flags appear, the teen may already feel invested in the relationship, and walking away suddenly feels harder than it should. There are warning signs that often appear during this stage. The person wants to move conversations to more private platforms. They compliment appearance constantly, but show little interest in everyday life. They ask about bodies, relationships, or secrets. They become upset if messages are not answered quickly, and they repeat the same phrase again and again. This stays just between us. That phrase matters, because real friendships do not depend on secrecy. Real relationships do not rely on pressure. And real friends do not try to isolate someone from the people who care about them, because most of the time, they build trust first, and only later begin applying pressure. These patterns are explored in more detail in the book Break Free From and Avoid Fear Online. It looks at how grooming, sextortion, cyberbullying and online predators actually operate. The book doesn't just explain the dangers, it also includes practical guidance. What to do if something like this is already happening, how to break the cycle of secrecy, how to ask for help, and how families can support someone safely through the situation. Because recognizing the pattern is only the first step. Knowing what to do next matters even more before trust becomes manipulation. And before a conversation that once felt harmless begins to lead somewhere dangerous. Because the most important thing to remember about grooming is this: it rarely begins with fear. It begins with something that feels like friendship. And sometimes the friend on the other side of the screen is not really a friend at all.